Welcome back everyone to the next part in our blogging app series. In the last part, we set up in-app purchases on App Store Connect's dashboard, and in this part, we're going to be setting them up on RevenueCat's dashboard, as well as writing the code to actually make purchases and restore purchases and all that good stuff. So without further ado, let's go ahead and smash that like button down below and jump into our Xcode project. So there is a couple things for housekeeping purposes that we need to do before we can actually get into all of the code. And that basically starts off here in the project navigator. You want to go ahead and select this tab at the top here for signing and capabilities. We're going to hit capability with a little plus sign, and we're going to search for in-app purchases. You want to add in-app purchases as a capability since that's what we're going to be hooking up with RevenueCat. The next thing we're going to do is jump into our IAP manager. Now you guys might recall in the last video we had copied and pasted our app specific shared secret here, and the reason we wanted to do this is we're going to want to put this in RevenueCat here. So go ahead and head on over to RevenueCat.com, create a free account if you don't have one already, and once you've signed in, at the top here you've got a drop down for apps. Go ahead and select that and hit add app. Now here, what we want to go ahead and do is first give a app name. So I'm going to go ahead and call it Thoughts iOS. The next thing that we want is our apps bundle ID. We can grab that directly from Xcode. So here in our project navigator, it's this guy right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and paste it in. And then finally, the last thing that we're going to want here is our app specific shared secret. And this is how RevenueCat is going to communicate on behalf of, our app and the backend for in-app purchases. So go ahead and copy that and boom, paste it on in and you should be good to go. We're going to leave the bottom part empty here since we're not dealing with a Android Play Store app. Go ahead and continue, and we're going to want to register a number of things here in the dashboard, namely entitlements, offerings, and products. So we're going to talk about each of those momentarily. The first thing that I want to do is here in our StoreKit configuration file, we're going to copy this product ID since we'll need it basically now. And we are first going to jump into the products pane here, and we're going to hit add. And essentially the products in RevenueCat here are a one-to-one mapping of our products that we have entered in the backend for App Store Connect. So for the store, it's going to be App Store just like that. We can create it and boom, we're good to go. The next thing that we're going to want to do is create an entitlement. The concept of entitlements is once a user subscribes to some plan that we offer, they get access to some level of entitlements. And we're going to basically inspect those entitlements to figure out what things in our app they have access to. So I'm going to go ahead and call this premium just like that. And this is going to be a description of get access to all articles, this one right here. We can go ahead and continue, and we're not quite done yet since we need to associate this entitlement with the given product. So go ahead and hit 0 products, hit attach, and there's going to be a drop down here and select the product that we had just created in the other dashboard pane. The last thing we're going to do is create an offering. An offering is a way to logically group products and entitlements together across multiple stores. So I'll show you guys what that means in just a moment here. We're going to give this an identifier of default. Its description is going to be Thoughts Premium Offering, just like that. We're going to go ahead and continue, and we're going to want to create a package here. So hit 0 packages. We're going to hit the add link, and we're going to want to create a monthly package. The description is going to be Thoughts Premium Offering, just like that. You might actually want to even call it Thoughts Premium Package to be a little more specific in terms of what it actually is, and go ahead and create it. And basically what you're going to want to do with this package is further click into this 0 products and associate products with it. So we're going to click add, and we're going to want to go ahead and say App Store product is the single one that we have here. So what I was saying about multiple stores, if you had, let's say, an Android app or something on Stripe, you can go ahead and attach those here as well to the single package. Now, we don't have anything in those, so our dropdowns are empty, but I digress. Hopefully that explains what I was getting at. So this is basically the products and entitlements and offerings that we need to set up here in RevenueCat's dashboard. Now we can actually jump into Xcode, and there's one more thing that I want to talk about before we start writing code, and that is the ability that RevenueCat offers to actually test with our local StoreKit config file in RevenueCat. So there is a tab here on the left under Tools called StoreKit testing. So what we can actually do is once we go to our StoreKit config file here, we're going to hit editor and I'm going to hit save public certificates. You can leave the default location and just hit save. And back over here in the dashboard, we can hit that area to browse for a particular file. And we're going to want to go ahead and add in the StoreKit configuration certificate. Now this allows RevenueCat, or allows us to test RevenueCat locally in the simulator, which is really nice when you're building and iterating, and it allows you to save a bunch of time, frankly. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to jump into API keys. I'm going to copy this API key here. It's the public one, which is pretty important. We're going to want to drop this into our code basically now, and we can start getting into writing our code to make purchases. So let's go ahead and jump into our app delegate. Now in here, the first thing you want to go ahead and do is import the purchases framework. We had brought this in via CocoaPods in, I believe, video number 1 or 2. And after we have configured Firebase, we're going to go ahead and say purchases dot configure, and we want to pass in the API key that we have just copied. Now this is going to initialize the SDK, and from here on out, we're going to write all of our IAP code or in-app purchase code in the IAP manager. So I'm going to delete that commented out shared secret, and here we're going to write out the essential 4 functions that we're going to need. So we're going to want a function for the latest purchase status. So we're going to say get subscription status. Now this is going to essentially call a purchases framework function, and we're going to cache that in user default, and that's how we're going to notify whether or not the user is premium or not. So instead of hard coding false here, we're going to say user defaults. Whoops, let's try that again. We're going to say user defaults dot standard, and we're going to say bool for key, and the key is going to be premium, just like that. And by default, a bool for key returns false, so that will work out nicely in our case. The next thing we're going to want is to subscribe to a given package that we're going to get from our fetch packages function that we're going to write momentarily. Now this is going to be a purchases dot package. So purchases dot package, just like that. Just make sure you don't have a typo. Let me also annotate this to all be a public function. This one here will be public as well for restore purchases. And let's see, what else do we want? So we can get a subscription status, which makes sense. We're going to also want to go ahead and fetch packages. So we're going to say public func, and here we're going to go ahead and say get packages, or we can actually say fetch packages, and this is going to have a completion handler, which is going to return a single purchases dot package optional to the caller. And this is how the caller is essentially going to fetch the package and return it to this purchase function here. So how do we actually start using the RevenueCat integrations? Well, we're going to write out all 4 of these functions really quickly. They're very, very brief, and this framework makes it a breeze to implement in-app purchases. So let's actually do get subscription status first. So all we need to do is say purchases shared, and there is a way to get purchase info. And purchase info, let's actually just do info, it'll auto-completes. And purchase info gives us a callback with info and a optional error. So we're going to unwrap both of these things. So from info, we can actually get entitlements. And the concept of entitlements, once again, allows you to figure out which things the user has access to. And we're also going to verify that the error is in fact nil. So we'll go ahead and, whoops, let me fix my typos there. We're going to go ahead and make sure the error is nil, otherwise we know something has gone wrong. So I'm just going to print out the entitlements here so we can get a glimpse in terms of what this is going to look like once we do a mock purchase. Let's go ahead and do the next one here. So fetch packages, this is pretty simple as well. I'm going to go ahead and say purchases, which is the singleton, purchases dot shared, and we're going to say give me the offerings. Now I don't believe you can get the packages directly because you can actually associate packages with offerings. So you need to go through the offerings, and this is going to return to you offerings as well as a error, and we're going to want to unwrap these again similar to above. So we're going to say the package that we want to get is going to be offerings. And from offerings, we can get all offerings, or you can get an offering with an identifier. I'm just going to go ahead and do the identifier approach since it's default which is pretty easy. Now on this, there's an available packages dot first, since we only have one package. We're also going to verify that the error is nil. So on the next line here, I'm actually going to line break here so we have a little more room. We're going to verify that the error in fact is nil. And if for whatever reason either of these fail, we're going to go ahead and say completion block pass back nil. We didn't get the package. Otherwise, we can pass back the package just like that. And that's how we're going to go about fetching our package. Pretty simple. Now, let's see why this is yelling at me. It's because we need a return in here as well. All right, looking pretty good. And then let's do these purchased or subscribe function, I guess. Let's go ahead and say once again, purchases dot shared, and we're going to want to go ahead and purchase a package. We're going to pass in the package, and this gives us a callback with a few pieces of information in here. So the first thing that we have in here is going to be the transaction. The next thing that we have is going to be the purchase info. The third one is an optional error in case something goes wrong. And this one here is if the user canceled the actual transaction. So we're going to want to guard against a bunch of these things. So I'm going to go ahead and say guard let transaction is going to be transaction. All right, makes sense. We're going to also say let entitlements is going to be, let's make sure we spell that right. Let entitlements is going to be info dot entitlements. We're also going to want to make sure the error is nil. We're also going to verify that the user has not canceled this transaction. So assuming all of those are good to go, we can come down here, and what I'm going to go ahead and do is we can, so there's actually a couple ways you can go about handling this. You can switch the transaction state and wait for it to be in the purchased state. You can also go ahead and just look at the entitlements directly. So I'm going to go ahead and switch on the transaction state. Now, if you don't see autocomplete popping up there for transaction state, it's probably because you haven't imported StoreKit where that transaction comes from. So don't forget to do that. So here we're going to say transaction state, and if it's still not auto-completing, hit Command B, and you're going to start seeing it get a syntax highlighted. We can hit the error and hit fix, and it'll go ahead and bring in everything for you. And I'm just going to print out the cases here so we can see what's actually going on. So in this case, we'd be purchased. All right, looking good. And I'm going to print out the entitlements in this case. In this case, we would have failed. In this case, we'll restore the purchase. And finally, this one is deferred, which is a little out of scope for what we want to implement here. And finally, this one is our default case. And let's go ahead and do our restore purchases, since the user might have gotten a new device or deleted the app or so on and so forth. So once again, purchases, shared, and we're going to go ahead and say restore transactions. And in fact, this info and error that it gives us is an identical closure, which is the same as this one that we got up here when we get the subscription status. So we can actually go ahead and literally copy and paste it, except the one thing I'm going to change here is in the print statement, we're just going to prefix it restored so we can distinguish which one we're looking at. So that is basically all that we need to do to set up in-app purchases in the app. Now in here, once the user has purchased, we're going to set user defaults equal to true for premium, which is how we're going to assess if the user is premium or not. So here is the key. So I'm going to come down here and we're going to go ahead and say user defaults. Let's try that again. User defaults, standard defaults. And we want to go ahead and set true, and it's not actually set value. I believe there is one for set a bool directly. Let's see if we can find it. Here it is. We want to set true for the key of premium, just like that. So go ahead and jump into your app delegate here, and we're going to go ahead and call some of these functions to make sure they are working before we hook them up to our user interface. So the first that we're going to actually do is we're going to fetch packages, and this is going to give us a package optional. So here we're going to go ahead and unwrap it. So we'll say package is package, else we're going to go ahead and return. And I'm going to print here iteratively to make sure we're actually, everything is going to plan. So we're going to say got package. The next thing we're going to want to do is IP manager shared, and we're going to subscribe to the package, and presumably we're going to want to call back here as well. Now we're just testing, so we'll tweak it in a moment, but let's go ahead and hit the play button. We wrote a ton of code. Let's make sure that it's actually working in our simulator here. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, in your simulator to test in-app purchases, you're going to want to go to settings and sign into a Apple ID account. So you can see I'm signed into mine up here. Even for sandbox testing, which is what we're doing here, you want to make sure you sign in. Otherwise, you're going to get errors in your actual console here when testing with Xcode. So hopefully I didn't forget a step there. Generally, when you're setting up in-app purchases, it's quite a lot of legwork to make sure like every edge case is covered and you don't have anything fancy going on. So here it's saying you're currently subscribed to this, your 1 month subscription. So basically I was testing something similar to this. So one way you can go about testing this, or retesting this I should say, is by resetting your simulator. So let's take a look at what we're getting here. So we're actually getting that we got the package and it's actually telling us that we've purchased the product. And what it did is it went through that purchase state already. So let's go ahead and let's tweak some things. So here in the purchase function, what I'm going to go ahead and do, or the subscribe function, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to say guard, and we're going to verify that the user isn't premium already. Because if they are premium already, we don't want to purchase it again because that would just be redundant logic. So user already subscribed, just like that. Let's go to IAP manager, or app delegate is what I'm looking for. And here what we can also go ahead and do is we could put that check here as well. Actually, instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is we're going to jump into this guy. And here we're saying that we successfully purchased everything. And if we purchased everything, here it's showing us our entitlements. And what we want to actually do is from our entitlements, see if the active entitlement has premium in it, which it looks like has a capital P. So how do we do that? So we have this function here of get subscription status. What I'm going to go ahead and do is here we are going to say have a completion block, and this completion block is going to be escaping, and this escaping completion block is going to give us a boolean back in terms of whether the user is subscribed or not. So how do we do that? We have entitlements that we're printing out here. From entitlements, we're going to say if entitlements dot is active is what I'm looking for. Let's see if I can find it. So I believe there's an active. Yep, there's an active like this. Now, if active isn't empty, we already know that we're subscribed, but since we want to be a little more intentional about it, one way that we could go about doing this, a cleaner way, is we could say all is what I'm looking for, and then we're going to say premium is the key that we care about. And if this is active, and because this is optional, we're going to have to say equals true, we can go ahead and say completion true. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and say completion false. So that's how we're going to actually notify whether or not the user is premium or not. And in here, since we're getting the purchase info directly, we're going to want to update the cache as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say user defaults.standard, and we are going to set true for the key of premium, and make sure the case sensitivity and spelling is correct, otherwise you're going to run into some major issues down the road. So that's going to be true, and this one's going to be false. So what we essentially will do is every time the app launches, we're going to go ahead and call this function, which will update this from the latest value that we get from RevenueCat, which will make our lives a whole lot easier. And in fact, we can probably make this optional, this closure callback, and that way what we can actually end up doing is simply call this function and get the callback if we need it. So we'll go ahead and say completion, just like that. So that takes care of this function and rounding it out. Let's continue down and let's see what else we have. So fetch packages is already looking good. We return the package via the completion. In this case, we have the subscribe function, which takes a package. Now we also want it to have a callback. So we're going to say completion here, and this completion should essentially return a bool telling us what happened to the transaction or the purchase attempt? Was it successful? Did it fail? We don't really care in the callback why it failed. You could optionally, extend it to be more indicative of what happened, but for our case, we don't really care. So if the user isn't premium, we're going to go ahead and say completion, and we're going to say true. In other words, we didn't actually subscribe, but the reason we're saying true is because we are already subscribed, which in this case makes sense. So let's go ahead and fix this print statement here. We're going to do that. Let me drop these extra quotation marks. Let's continue down. So here in the purchased state, if again this entitlement includes the premium key, we're going to go ahead and say completion true. So here I'm going to go ahead and basically copy this, and we're going to drop it directly into here. So we're going to go ahead and say boom, and it's actually supposed to be one-to-one. We can just drop the question mark for the optionality of the callback, and you should be good to go. So we're updating the user defaults after we have checked the premium entitlement. So we can go ahead and actually, I'll still print in here. So we'll say purchased, just like that. And in this case, we'll say purchased, or purchase failed, I guess is what we'll say. Purchase failed, just like that. Let's continue down. In all of these cases, I guess we can return false if we wanted to, but later on we'll handle these as needed. And for restore purchases, here we're going to do the exact same thing actually. So we're going to go ahead and take our if-else check, and we're going to put this here, and we're going to drop the question mark for the callback optionality. And in fact, we never actually added a callback here. So let's go ahead and add a completion handler, which is going to be an escaping closure, where the argument is going to be a Boolean, and it's going to return void to us. So cool, looking pretty good. Now, how do we actually go about testing this? So let's see if I can actually go ahead and delete the app, and we're going to also take a look at a way to restore or refund the purchase. I believe there used to be a way. If you go into debug, there used to be an in-app purchases panel in here. It looks like Apple has recently moved it, so let's see if we can find it somewhere in features. So there's Apple Pay, there's location services, etc., etc. Let's try IO. If you can't find it in here, another way that you can test this is by just resetting your simulator altogether. Now, keep in mind, if you do reset your simulator, one thing that you'll want to do is log into your App Store account again, your Apple ID account, in your app settings, or your device settings, I should say. So let's go ahead and actually just give this a run. Since once we try to purchase, we should get something in our console. It looks like we have a build error here, so let's go ahead and fix this. So here we're saying IP manager subscribe, and this is going to have a callback now since we just added it. So we're going to say success in, and here we're going to say success colon, I'm just going to interpolate success, go ahead and give that a run, and let's see what ends up happening. So since we're already subscribed and we're now handling the fact that the user is subscribed, we should be able to get the appropriate functionality here. All right, wait for my simulator to launch. All right, we get the purchase sheet. So we can see here that it got the package. And what we probably want to do, instead of even doing this, what we want to actually do is we want to check the user's purchases, their purchase info from the get-go, right? So right now, if I go ahead and hit the button to confirm the purchase, you're going to see this prompt here, and we should see success is true, just like that. We have subscribed perfectly. So what we actually want to do is hook that up to this subscribe button here. So let's actually run this app again. And now that we're subscribed, we should not see that purchase sheet again. That was a tongue twister, but since we are subscribed, no more purchase sheet. We should see a log here saying that, hey, we're already purchased. So we got the package and it's saying user is already subscribed, and we're saying success is true, and we're not seeing the actual sheet. So looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and get rid of this code here, and we're going to move it into the appropriate view controller. But one thing we want to do is say ipmanager.shared, and we are going to say go ahead and get the subscription status, but without a completion handler. And the reason we're doing this is as soon as the app launches, we want to get the latest status from RevenueCat. And let me add some prints in here so we can actually see what is going on. So we're going to say got updated status of subscribed, just like that. And in this case, we're going to say got updated status of not subscribed. So let's see what happens if we actually delete this app and try to run it again. And since we're calling that function now in the app delegate, let's see what we actually get printed out. And then we'll hook up all of these calls to our buttons on our paywall controller. And then we'll wrap it up there. So lots of setup, lots of foundation work, but once you get this out of the way, you are good to monetize your application, and money will start flowing in as soon as you let it hit the App Store. So here we have got updated status of not subscribed, which makes sense because it's a brand new app install instance. So the user would either need to restore the purchases or subscribe, right? Because when we hit restore, we're going to go to RevenueCat and say, hey, try to restore the transaction. And if you're able to, go ahead and update our user default value. Otherwise, go ahead and you can just fail. And I'm actually going to add some prints inside of here as well so we can actually see this happen. So we're going to say restored success, and down here we're going to say failed to restore. So here we're going to say restored failure, just like that. Let's go ahead and jump into our paywall view controller, and we can finally start hooking our buttons up. So let's see if we actually created functions for our buttons. We in fact did, because we were smart about it. So it did tap subscribe. All we want to go ahead and do in here is say IAP manager dot shared, and we are going to first go ahead and fetch the packages. This should give us a package in. So we're going to go ahead and say guard let package, and get rid of that extra space, is going to be package. Else, we're going to go ahead and simply say return, since we didn't get the package, which is not good. Once we've gotten the package, we can say IAP manager shared, and we can also go ahead and now say subscribe, and we're going to pass in the package, and this is going to give us a success back. Now for our success, what do we want to do? Well, first we're going to simply print it out. So we're going to say purchase, and we're going to go ahead and interpolate that there. And on the main thread, what we want to do is I'm going to say if success, go ahead and dismiss the view controller. So we're going to say dismiss true, completion is going to be nil. Make sure you retain weak self here so you don't cause a memory leak. So we're going to say self optional dot dismiss. And in the unsuccessful case, other words, a failure occurred or something went wrong, we're going to show an alert view to the user saying failed to make purchase. So we're going to go ahead and say alert. It's going to be UI alert controller. Title is going to be subscription failed. The message is going to be we were unable to complete the transaction. Let's not have a bunch of typos in here. Let's fix those along the way. Fix that there. And finally, the preferred style is going to be an alert. Now you can have maybe a retry button on here. We're not going to have that in our case. We're just going to say present said alert with an animation, completion is nil, and I'm going to add a single button to our alert here. So we're going to go ahead and simply say alert dot action. It's going to be UI alert action with a title of dismiss, style cancel, and handler will be nil. So this is how purchasing, I should say, is going to work. Let's take a look at restoring purchases. So this is going to be IAP manager shared, and we're going to go ahead and say restore. And this is once again going to be success in. And in fact, we can actually copy this entire thing here. The only thing that we want to change is the alert text. Since we're not purchasing, we're actually restoring. And I'll also change up the print statement so we can get a more accurate representation in terms of what actually happened. So here I'm going to go ahead and say restored. Now in the success case, we're going to say dismiss. Don't forget to capture weak self here to avoid a memory leak. And here I'm going to say subscription. We'll say failed to restore, I guess. Or maybe we'll say restoration failed. So we have the same verbiage as our other function. We were unable to restore a previous transaction. Looking good. Got a cancel button. And I believe that's all that we need in here. So let's go ahead and give our app a run. Let's make sure we got rid of this stuff in IAP manager, or whoops, app delegate is what I'm looking for, because we don't want to trigger a purchase as soon as the user, launches the app, because that would just be a little annoying for a user, and B, super against App Store guidelines. So let's go ahead and launch. We should see our paywall since we've hard coded it to pop up when we actually launch our application. So we're going to go ahead and hit our purchase button here, and boom, we get the share sheet, or the subscription sheet I should say, immediately. We can go ahead and hit cancel, or just click out of it. I can go ahead and hit the restore button here, and you see here restoration failed. Let's try to go ahead and subscribe again. So we're going to hit this. I'm going to go ahead and hit subscribe and confirm it. We're going to get a alert to confirm, and it should be successful and go away just like that. So looking pretty awesome. Let's go ahead and run our app again, and I think we are actually already checking before showing the paywall to make sure that we have successfully subscribed the user and not to show the paywall then. So we shouldn't actually see the paywall UI, which in fact we don't. So that is in-app purchases in a nutshell. So we are successfully setting up RevenueCat here. We've configured the dashboard, which is pretty great, and we can restore purchases as well as make purchases. So that's looking pretty good. I think it's time to start moving on to actually building out the functionality to sign in, create blog posts, your profile, and build out the core functionality of our app, as well as the logic to show the paywall, if a user tries to read 2 articles within 24 hours or some other period of time. So that's all I've got for you guys. Let me know down below if you have any questions. If you ran into any issues with RevenueCat, there's a couple of gotchas along the way. So one thing that you should double check is that you're signed into your Apple ID account on your simulator. Make sure that you're using the appropriate API key here for RevenueCat. Make sure that your bundle ID and all the other identifiers that you've added here are correct. They need to be case sensitively matching. And if you're testing in Xcode, double check that your StoreKit testing certificate has also been uploaded. Either way, drop a like down below, subscribe for more, and stay tuned for the next part where we're going to start building out our core app functionality. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys there.